Hello everybody and welcome to Amphlett Reviews, back with another Hong Kong content review, continuing on with the Dragon Inn series, as mentioned within my previous video for the first Dragon Inn film on the Eureka edition. Phenomenal film, absolutely fantastic, just really lived up to the hype and the expectations going into it. Brilliant director, lots of positivity around this film. Definitely check this one out. It is available on the Eureka edition and of course on the Criterion. And as mentioned in that video, I'm going to be doing a couple of follow-ups to the Dragon Inn series. I know there is variations of spin-offs as well, which I won't be focusing on. I'm going to be talking about mainly the new Dragon Gate Inn, the follow-up to this, the Flying Swords of the Dragon Gate, and the Goodbye Dragon Inn, which is a completely different film by itself, but that's something I think is very relevant, very interesting to this kind of series of videos that we're talking about. If there's any that I'm missing that I think is worth my time, I know there is a few variation spin-offs or more modern Hong Kong movies, please comment down below, but they're the core ones that I'll be focusing on and discussing with you guys on this little journey. And now the year is 1992, we are following up with the remake reimagining of the new Dragon Gate Inn this time around, with much more snazzy kind of visual effects and much more traditional high-flying kick-assery, acrobatic up and down the air, defined gravity, physics of wuxia style action, which is all over this film. Is absolutely insane. Before we get into the actual review itself, I want to talk a little bit about the production and behind the scenes of the film, which I think is very fascinating. Now, this is directed by Raymond Lee. Now, Raymond Lee was a collaborator and associate with Tsui Hark. Now, Tsui Hark is a producer and writer of this film, so he wrote basically a new adaptation of the original film, obviously being a big fan of the original Dragon Inn. So he's done a reimagining, a new take on the material, written for the film. Didn't direct himself, but allowed his friend to do it. I do swear, Tsui Hark did do this film, because it definitely is all over the blueprint of what this film is in terms of the style and the humor. If you don't buy the fact he directed it, you can definitely tell he wrote the film, because it definitely is under his kind of wheelhouse, but does have some restraint compared to some of his other films, like Zulu Warriors, for instance, where that film was just non-stop, just insanity and, melting your mind. This does have some similar ideas to it, that kind of level, but it does reserve itself back. Now, as mentioned, this film is directed by Raymond Lee, which also did the Swordsman movie. Now, the Swordsman is one that I haven't got around to reviewing yet, but quite a fascinating kind of production, being the fact that King Wu was also directing that film. He kind of left production about halfway through, I believe, a couple of months into it for various reasons. We don't know what those reasons are even to this day, unless it comes out in some form of an extra of some kind. But he was basically spearheading that film, left the production for whatever reason, and then Tsui Hark, being a producer and being involved in that film, got himself and a few other directors, including Raymond Lee, to basically finish off the film. So you have half of the original director of Dragon Inn with the kind of predecessor, alongside Tsui Hark also being involved. So Tsui Hark's all over the material that you're seeing here, guys. Now, with the remake, the new Dragon Gate Inn is a complete reimagining of the original entry. It takes some liberties and has a very similar setting and idea in terms of the concept. It has a similar kind of three-act structure to the original, but plays it very, very different. It's not trying to be a faithful adaptation or doing the exact same thing as the original, but just taking the cool concept and basically doing its own thing and running completely wild. This is a bonkers, hard R18 rated film that is very violent and just completely quite messy at times, all over the place in terms of where it wants to go. It's just, a real kind of thrill, fun ride from start to finish. It goes in a few different directions, which I wasn't really expecting. They managed to do quite a bit within one location, surprisingly, and I definitely think compared to the original in terms of story, where the original was quite a simplistic, relatively easy to follow. Here's your good guys, here's your bad guys. You've got an evil emperor character, which has a traditional third act kind of fight, and that's your film, and it's all played very kind of stealthily, and there's some tension and there's some kind of witty kind of humor and some dark humor in places in that, and it's very kind of clean cut and very kind of straightforward, and it's very well done, very well handled. It's a very enjoyable film, and it has a lot of creativity within that. It allows for creativity within that. Obviously, times have changed now, going into the 90s, and we have the more traditional kind of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, wuxia style, flying acrobatic kind of, bonkers that is. And then obviously Tsui Hark being involved, being the writer in this one, with some established movies from Raymond Lee, which is also involved in the Swordsman movies, which also do the same kind of thing. It would make sense to kind of update this and add that kind of flair and style to the film, which this film has so much style and so much kind of oozing with kind of energy in terms of its kind of setting and its richer kind of production, has a bigger kind of ideas in places, while keeping it relatively in the same location for the most part. It definitely is expanding on some of the ideas from the original and changing a few things up in some creative ways, which I do like, and adding some new characters alongside as well, and adding new romance and some new drama, new tension. It's not trying to be the original, it's doing its own thing with the same kind of idea, which I really do appreciate for a kind of a reimagining. I think this is a much better example of a remake, reimagining, compared to something like the one on Swordsman, which Tsui Hark was involved in, with called The Sword, which I really did not like. I thought that was a pretty terrible. The tone and the feel of that one was completely wrong, completely off, regardless being a remake or not. And yeah, I didn't get anything from that. But this I felt was much more appropriate and much more better handled, being the fact that maybe Tsui Hark didn't direct this one. I do feel there is some ghost directing in places. I do think that, because I just think the material and the way the kind of film's presented is very Tsui Hark in very specific kind of times and moments during the film. But being the fact that he's just the writer, you got someone else coming in doing their own take, doing their own vision, I think definitely complement each other quite well. And of course, being a late 90s Hong Kong movie, you have some of the best involved in this film in terms of the collaboration. You have Donnie Yen as our main kind of Empress kind of bad guy character, which is playing the riff on the original. He's only in it for a limited time. He's mostly in the start of the film and then appears at the kind of last 10-15 minutes. So he's kind of like the bookends, but his presence is definitely is known, and he offers some pretty awesome kind of on-screen presence of kind of villainous kind of essence to the film, and has a really kick-ass kind of really crazy kind of third act fight scene within the kind of the desert and the sand and the wind happening, and it gets a bit kind of practical effects heavy as well, which I think is quite cool. So yeah, really cool little kind of extended cameo from Donnie Yen, which is great to see him as a villain. And you've got three central characters and performers in the film. You have Tony Leung, which is playing a kind of a riff on the kind of the swordsman character from the original. He has, I believe, an umbrella. He has a very specific kind of style as a kind of fighting, and his character has a connection with Bridget Lin's character, which is a brand new original character for this film. Those two are basically kind of have some history. There is some chemistry, some romance there, and the film has a kind of a forbidden kind of, you know, tragic kind of romantic kind of feel towards it, being a late 90s Hong Kong film. That's very on point and very kind of, you know, traditional with these types of films. Whether you're a supernatural film, which I've dived into a little bit with the Chinese ghost story and the woman with the bride with the white hair, you know, there's always a form of kind of doom and gloom, tragic romance kind of elements to these films. And being it's late 90s, that is kind of the craze of what's going on. Whether you're a Wong Kar-wai film doing a drama, whether you're a spiritual ghost kind of ghoulish kind of film, supernatural movie, or whether you're a wuxia action-based film, there's always some form of kind of romance in these. And I think these two have great chemistry together. I think Bridget Lin's absolutely phenomenal. She's really on fire at this point. This is definitely her kind of golden age of her kind of on-screen presence, playing variations of the same type of character within the wuxia action-based space, but also was a fantastic performer, just as a kind of, you know, doing the Wong Kar-wai and some of the more collaborations, more drama-based kind of roles that she was doing. She definitely had a really good peak 90s kind of, you know, era with her, and I think she's fantastic in this film. I think she plays it so elegantly and so well, and she can really hold her own in terms of the performance, also within the action as well. You can believe that this actress can do all of it, and I think she plays she's just unique characters, even though they are kind of similar within the more action-based space. I think she's always a breath of fresh air to see on screen, and her chemistry between Maggie Chung, which is our third character and third collaborator, also adds some extra kind of chemistry and adds comedy and some kind of rivalry, which I really appreciate, being kind of like this sort of the jealous kind of innkeeper kind of character that Maggie Chung plays. And she's a bit of a darker character compared to what I usually would expect, being the fact that she kind of runs the new Dragon Gate Inn in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, and she basically has this kind of little mini operation. She has certain regulars that come by in some of the troops, and anyone that kind of crosses her or messes with her, she kills in her own kind of kung fu style. And then she basically kind of has a booby trap where she goes full Sweeney Todd, whatever you want to call it, and uses the meat of the people that she's killed with the buns, which I think is just really kind of ghoulish and horrible and just kind of unexpected and very kind of like, whoa, that's a bit strange. So she's a very jealous kind of character. She's someone who's very noxious at times. She definitely wants to be the center of attention. You know, she runs this entire place in the middle of the desert, and, you know, she's tired of people coming and going, and she just kind of wants some kind of very specific kind of people, ones that she kind of likes, the ones that she got some kind of flirtatious with or banter with. to stay a bit longer, essentially. And her character goes for a bit of an arc, and she becomes more of a likable character as she is, but it's hard to stay mad at Maggie Cheung because she's such a lovely kind of presence on screen, and she's always oozing with chemistry, and she was always a good performer, whether she's playing a action role, whether she's playing a bit more of a mistress or a comic relief role. But in this one, she definitely gets to have a full 180 in terms of her character, and being a selfish kind of innkeeper and kind of taking the money from various kind of opponents that are involved in the kind of the bigger drama that's going on, and becomes someone who steps up, gets in on the fight, puts her own life at risk, and she recognizes that she can't have Tony Leung's character in the film because he has an affection for Bridget Lin, which they have that kind of chemistry with the flute, and I like that kind of growth that just happened, and I think they expand upon that within the kind of the follow-up, the one that Jet Li's in, which unfortunately Maggie Cheung is not in that film, so I'm curious to see what they would do with that. All three performers are absolutely great in this film. I definitely think they are carrying the film on their backs, essentially, alongside the supporting cast, which absolutely is top notch. As mentioned, Donnie Yen is only a kind of extended kind of villainous role that appears in the bookends of the film. In terms of the actual film itself, throws in a lot of different ideas, and it doesn't always quite work. You never really know what direction the film's going because it doesn't really know itself, if I'm being honest. It has a very similar kind of idea from the original Emperor kind of character, the kind of the villainous kind of Donnie Yen. Basically, he is form a new kind of task force called the Black Flag Raiders, and he has special operations, special kind of groups that have special training with new weaponry work in terms of the kind of the bow and arrows and all that. And basically they are killing defectors and over Imperial guards, and there is one traitor that basically is planning to do treason, and basically wants to know who's in on this kind of treason, who's in on this kind of action that you're about to kind of follow. You're dead, essentially. I've got you, captured you, but I want your family. Your family are going to pay the price, and also anyone that's supporting, helping you, also go alongside it as well. So Donnie Yen's character devises a kind of a scheme, basically, to kind of trap and lure the kind of the Wong family into this kind of snare trap, and kind of find out who the kind of the supporters are involved. And you've got basically an interesting idea where you have the brother and the sister character that was in the original movie. In the original, they were much older people. They were involved in the Wong family. They were involved in this kind of drama that's going on. But this time around, they are kids, where compared to the original, they're adults. So that's interesting. So you've got some kids in danger. And basically, this chap goes wrong with Bridget Lin's character basically coming in, saving the kids, often distraction, going against kind of Donnie Yen's character and the kind of subordinates, and basically managed to get out of Dodge and save these kids, and basically trying to flee across the mountains. Their goal is to basically get to the Dragon Gate Passage, which is above the mountains, and the kind of the pit stop in between is the Dragon Gate Inn, which is essentially this kind of hotel, tavern kind of bar, this kind of resting place. The location this time around is much different compared to the original, where this one is a lot more desert-based, has a lot more kind of freakish kind of storms of lightning and sand pits and kind of thing, quicksand, and all sorts of kind of nasty, unpredictable weather. It's a very dangerous kind of location, and basically the Donnie Yen's character has sealed off all the kind of the borders, all the entrances essentially, and how to get past the border and to kind of save these kids from being executed, and they're putting their life on the line, and there is a bigger play at stake essentially. So as to be expected, the middle act of the film is very messy. It's a little bit all over the place, and as mentioned before, it purely comes down to, are you enjoying the crazy bonkers action, wuxia style, flying acrobatic kind of action set pieces, and are you enjoying these performers? Are you enjoying these actors basically carrying the film alongside some excellent supporting characters? It has a completely bonkers sense of kind of stylized kind of action with its cinematography and with its wuxia style fighting. It's definitely is an 18 rated for sure. It definitely kind of gets raunchy in places. It gets very violent. It has some really strange kind of twists and turns within some of the character motivations. Even the kind of the melodrama love story triangle that happens in the film, I think is actually pretty fun and pretty entertaining. Maggie Cheung's a blast. Bridget Lin's great. Tony Leung's great. And Donnie Yen is a really kind of nasty, kind of fun bad guy to end your film on. And I think the location, is a great kind of character by itself as well. And I think they made enough changes to make it interesting and to make it fun. I had an absolute blast with this film. I thought it was really fun. I think there's just enough there in terms of the story, in terms of the action, in terms of the stylized kind of cinematography. I think it's just a really good reimagining adaptation of the original that doesn't hurt either one of them. Both are very separate in their own regards, and I think they've definitely worked well for a 60s film and for a 90s film. So definitely recommend. Hopefully this will get a Blu-ray release down the line, a nice HD presentation. It definitely does deserve it for sure. So what are your thoughts and opinions on the new Dragon Gate Inn? Please comment down below. What are your thoughts on the follow-up to this, the Flying Swords of the Dragon Gate? Please comment down below. So meantime, guys, Amphlett Reviews, signing out.